Biden faults Saudis, Russia for rising gas prices. Protesters gather in support of Julian Assange in Washington. With thousands dead, Afghans demand investigations into U.S. invasion. Africa has world's highest rates of suicide. Anti-Muslim massacre in India was aided by BJP hate and police absence. From Chicago studios, this is the Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum, I'm Samana Siddiqui. Our top story tonight. On Friday, U.S. President Joe Biden blamed Saudi Arabia and Russia for rising gas prices after OPEC moved to dramatically cut production. The president signaled he is looking for alternatives in the wake of OPEC's decision to cut global oil production by roughly 2 million barrels per day. Senior Biden administration officials have said it is a sign that the oil-producing bloc is aligning behind Russia. Meanwhile, Russia's war in Ukraine is in its 7th month. Global oil prices have risen more than 10% this week. The production cut is not supposed to go into effect until November. Biden has sought to reduce its effects on the U.S. market by authorizing the release of some 10 million barrels from the U.S. strategic reserves. A demonstration was held outside the U.S. Department of Justice in Washington on Saturday, calling for the freedom of Julian Assange. Video shows protesters holding banners and pictures of the Australian editor, publisher, and activist demanding his release and not his extradition to the United States. Demonstrations were also held in the Croatian capital Zagreb, Serbia's capital Belgrade, and London in support of Assange. Assange is being held in the UK, where authorities authorized his extradition to the US in June. He is wanted for his alleged role in espionage and the dissemination of classified US military information. Assange founded WikiLeaks in 2006, which published a series of leaks provided by US Army intelligence analyst Chelsea Manning in 2010. New York City Mayor Eric Adams declared a state of emergency on Friday. This was to address a mass influx of migrants forcibly sent there by Republican state governors. About 5 to 6 buses chartered by the governors have been arriving in New York City each day with asylum seekers. Adams said the city is now in a crisis situation with more than 61,000 people in New York City shelters. That includes over 17,000 asylum seekers. New York City is slated to surpass the highest number of people in its shelters ever recorded. Migrants have been bused from other parts of the country over the past few months. Adams said this humanitarian crisis started with violence and instability in South America, and it is being accelerated by American political dynamics. The University of Texas at Dallas recognized the contributions of Dr. Bashir Ahmed and his wife, Dr. Shakila Ahmed, by naming an auditorium after them. The Ahmeds donated $1 million to the university. This was to establish a distinguished chair in the School of Natural Sciences and Mathematics to support multicultural student studies. Ahmed said he always wanted to support institutions that promote the teaching of sciences and technology. He was a professor of psychiatry at the University of Texas Health Science Center Southwestern Medical School for several years. He also served as director of the Department of Psychiatry in various Fort Worth hospitals before retiring in 2005. As well, Dr. Ahmed helped found the Institute of Quranic Knowledge and Intra-Faith Religious Acceptance and the Muslim Community Center for Human Services, where he currently serves as chairman emeritus. Prosecutors on Friday played secretly recorded audio from a 2020 meeting to show how a paramilitary group was connected to a plot to kidnap Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer. The audio involved talk about police and politicians in the home of Adam Fox, who was recently convicted of conspiring to abduct Whitmer. It was a step toward kicking off a U.S. civil war, known to extremists as the Boogaloo authorities said. The FBI intervened in the fall of 2020. Joe Morrison, Paul Beller, and Steve Musico, members of the Wolverine Watchman Group, are charged with providing material support to Fox and others. They are not accused of directly participating in the kidnapping plot. Prosecutors won convictions against Fox and 3 other men in federal court. Testimony began Wednesday on the state court trial in Jackson, Michigan. The Uvalde Consolidated Independent School District has suspended working with the local police department. This is in response to an investigation into the May mass shooting that killed 19 students and 2 teachers. The Texas Police Chiefs Association and JPPI Investigations are investigating the delayed response by police during the May 24th shooting at Robb Elementary. Lieutenant Miguel Hernandez and Ken Mueller have been placed on administrative leave, and the school district has suspended all police department activities, according to a news release. Due to recent developments, the school district has additional concerns with department operations, it said. The district's action comes after the firing of Crimson Elizondo, a state trooper who arrived on the scene within 2 minutes of receiving the call. In July, the Texas Department of Public Safety initiated an internal review into law enforcement response to the shooting. On Friday, Canada instituted bans on more than 10,000 senior leaders in Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, including its elite Quds force. The decision came as a response to Iran's ongoing crackdown on mass protests. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said, "We are using the most powerful tools at our disposal to crack down on this brutal regime." The top 50% of the IRGC leadership, more than 10,000 officers and senior members most responsible for the state's behavior, won't be allowed into Canada, he said. Trudeau emphasized the designation is a permanent decision, and those sanctioned will be inadmissible to Canada forever. Meanwhile, Iran says Mahsa Amini died as a result of cerebral hypoxia due to sudden heart rhythm disorder, decreased blood pressure and loss of consciousness, and insufficient oxygen to the brain, the report said. Amini's death, which sparked protests nationwide in Iran, was caused by illness, Iran's forensic medicine organization said in a report on Friday. We're bringing more news stories after the break, so stay tuned, and we'll be right back after these messages.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes.
Despite the development of a COVID-19 vaccine, millions around the world will not have access. We need a vaccine that's free and available to everyone, everywhere. It's time for a people's vaccine.
There are 16 million children struggling with hunger in America. That's 1 in 5 daughters, sons, neighbors, and classmates who don't know where their next meal is coming from. Yet billions of pounds of good food go to waste every year. It's time we do something about it. Feeding America is a nationwide network of food banks that helps provide meals to millions of kids and families in need. Visit feedingamerica.org to help them feed even more. Together, we can solve hunger. Together, we're feeding America.
To stop this genocide, we need your help.
The families of thousands of Afghans killed in the United States' 20-year military campaign in the country are now seeking justice for their deceased loved ones. The 2001 invasion of Afghanistan by U.S.-led coalition forces was launched on the grounds that the ruling Taliban harbored the late al-Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden. The campaign ended with the withdrawal of foreign troops on August 30th last year. More than 47,000 civilians lost their lives in the military operations during these 2 decades under the guise of the U.S. War on Terror. Over 2,400 U.S. soldiers were killed, as well as more than 3,000 Afghans who died while working for the U.S. Africa has the world's highest rate of deaths by suicide, the World Health Organization reports. Roughly 11 people per 100,000 die by suicide each year in the African region, it said. That's higher than the global average of 9 suicide deaths per 100,000 people. The WHO said the continent is home to 6 of the 10 countries with the highest suicide rates. The agency attributed this to insufficient action to address risk factors, including mental health conditions affecting 116 million people, up from 53 million in 1990. The African region has 1 psychiatrist for every 500,000 people, 100 times less than WHO's recommendation. There's growing anxiety across Europe as the continent braces for energy shortfalls and possibly blackouts this winter. Near Berlin's Tempelhof Airport, Peter Engelke put up a new security gate at his firewood warehouse because of concerns about desperate people stealing his stock. The apparent sabotage of the Nord Stream gas pipeline is the latest sign of the region's critical position. Russia has slashed supplies in the standoff over the war in Ukraine. At a Friday summit in Prague, European Union leaders stopped short of agreeing on a gas price cap amid concerns such a move could threaten supplies to the region. Nearly 70% of European heating comes from natural gas and electricity. With Russian deliveries drastically reduced, wood has become a sought-after commodity. It is already used by roughly 40 million people for heating. Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro and leftist challenger Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva were targeted on social media by false claims of Satanism, Freemasonry, and cannibalism. Lula posted a 5-point statement on Facebook saying he had not cut a deal with the devil, nor had he spoken with Satan. He later participated in an event with Franciscan friars. On Saturday, Bolsonaro attended the country's largest religious festival, the Catholic celebration of Cristo de Nazaré, in Belém, capital of the northern state of Pará. A series of viral videos and false political propaganda sought to cast doubt on each candidate's faith after the first round of elections. Both men tout their Christian beliefs. Bolsonaro is banking on securing the backing of evangelical voters in his bid for re-election. A fact-finding committee on the February 2020 communal riots in northeast Delhi in India concluded the Union Home Ministry delayed deploying additional forces in violence-hit areas. The communal riots continued unabated between February 23 and 26, 2020, according to the committee's report. Headed by former Supreme Court Judge Madan B. Lokur, the committee delivered one of the most detailed reports on the 2020 Delhi riots. It found the Home Ministry's careless response, Delhi Police's blatant complicity in the violence, a divisive media narrative, and Bharatiya Janata Party's hate campaign against Muslims collectively responsible for the riots. The committee found Delhi Police not only was complicit in the violence against Muslims, but also showed lack of professionalism and pro-BJP bias. Coming up next after the break is our in-depth analysis segment, so stay tuned, and we'll be right back after these messages.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour, walk a mile in my shoes, walk a mile in my shoes.
What was it like when you started this network out, when you started Sound Vision those many years ago?
You know, after 9/11, one lady called me and she says, what is your channel which I can watch? And I say, I'm sorry, we don't have a channel. And you know what she said? She said, then how America will know about you?
SubhanAllah. Anything you want to say to the people who are watching? That we had one sister who messaged that she grew up on Sound Vision. What do you say to the people who have been long supporters?
Thank you. Thank you. It is because of you we are able to do all of that. So the generation of Adam's world, you need to take it over for the next generation. And that's my invitation to you. To keep telling everybody where to watch. They can watch it on Galaxy 19 satellite, Amazon Fire TV, Apple TV, or easy thing, muslimnetwork.tv, or our YouTube channel, or our Facebook channel. And with your help, inshallah, ladies, the one who called me, what channel should I watch Muslims on? Answer is here and now.
To stop this genocide, we need your help.
Welcome back. It's time for our in-depth analysis segment. Let's watch.
Christian nationalism is rising, and now 61% of Republican voters say they will support declaring United States of America as a Christian nation. University of Maryland critical issues poll suggests that this conversation could find its place in 2024 presidential race. We have one of the a professor who has led this poll, Stella Rouse. Welcome to Muslim Network TV.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Stella Rouse is Professor of Government and Politics and Associate Director of the University of Maryland Critical Issues Poll. So, did the results of your poll surprise you?
A little. I wasn't expecting the number to be as high, and I certainly wasn't expecting the fact that even though a majority of Republicans would like to see the United States be a Christian nation, they said they would have this preference, even though they admit that it's not constitutional. So that was a little surprising. A majority of Republican respondents said that they knew it was not constitutional, but even though it's not constitutional, they would still like to see the U.S. become a Christian nation.
So is that one of the reasons some people are asking for constitutional convention?
It could be, certainly on the right, to amend the Constitution. Some people believe that it should be a constitution based on divine Christian rights, and certainly there might be some movement in that area to make it so it is constitutional to do that, because I think many see it as being very difficult to apply Christian nationalism if in the Constitution it states that there is a separation between church and state.
What is the trend? Did you did you ask the same question earlier? What is the trend here? Is it a rising number?
We only can have conjecture to know that it's a rising number. We have not trended these questions. These are more recent questions given the rise in Christian nationalism and the message by many Republican candidates and politicians making this message, because as we note in the article, Christian nationalism has been around for a long time, but it's usually operated on the fringes. Only a small percentage of people would even raise the issue of the U.S. becoming a Christian nation. And it has certainly taken much more mainstream hold in the Republican Party, with people who are elected to Congress now, and those seeking to be either elected to Congress or to run to become governors are now running on a Christian nationalist message.
What is Christian nationalism? Would you mind defining that for us?
It's the desire to have the principles of a country run as a Christian nation with no separation between the church and state.
So separation of church and state is the founding stone of our Constitution, isn't it?
It is. It's very much one of the foundational stones of our country and our Constitution.
And the founders were Christians who worshipped as a Christian, but they came up with this idea. How the founders did not find it suitable to declare it to be a Christian country?
Well, because as you know, many of the founders came to the colonies because their religious practices were being persecuted in England. And so they found a place where they can practice their religion without interference from a government. And so that is why it became a foundation of our country, because many of the founding fathers had the experience of government interfering in their right to practice religion, and knew that a government that was run on one particular religion would likely persecute other religions. And so it was very purposeful, even though they were, as you noted, practicing Christians of different denominations, that there be this separation when the Constitution was written.
So when they're looking for America to be a Christian nation based on which denomination?
Well, that's a very good question, right? What do people mean when they say Christian nation? Obviously, as we write in the story, this desire is led by Republican white evangelicals. So 73% of, and I shouldn't say white because it was 73% of those who said that they were evangelical or born again Christians would like to see the U.S. become a Christian nation. And so I would imagine that, evangelicalism, Protestantism would be kind of a driving force of this, but we didn't specifically ask a question about denomination, so it's hard to really precisely answer that question.
Were you able to ask questions similar to our correlation between those people who think the U.S. Should be declared a Christian nation and correlation with those people who approve of January 6th violence?
Yes, we didn't run the crosstabs on that. I believe we do have that information. That's really interesting. But what we did do, and we had written about this in a previous story that we did, was we correlated it to those who feel that the white race is being persecuted and discriminated against. And so the numbers are pretty high. The correlation is pretty high. Those who feel that whites are being persecuted, are being discriminated against, much more so than other groups, are much more likely to want to see the U.S. Become a Christian nation.
Considering that, gun purchase is very high, purchase of ammunition is pretty high in the country, and almost all sort of people are buying guns, and conflicts, political conflicts, is also very high. Do you think you feel somewhat of a risk that people who like to turn it into a Christian nation might join in larger number to militias, or those people who are willing to use violence to achieve their purpose?
Yes, I think all these things are interrelated. We have seen militia groups like the Oath Keepers, many of which have Christian nationalist sentiments, and other groups like this that played a large role in January 6th and the attack on the Capitol. They have also risen in prominence with the election of Donald Trump. And so I think there's a significant fear that these things will come together, these militia groups, coupled with the ease of access of weapons in this country, and the desire to not only perhaps turn the country as a Christian nationalist country, but to deny other democratic principles by which this country was founded, like respecting the outcome of legitimate elections. I think all these things are tied together.
Professor Rouse, what are the indicators which you have seen? Because of that, you write in your article in Politico that it is becoming mainstream.
That it's becoming mainstream, right? Yes, that is the big concern, right? We have a lot of extreme views that have often operated on the fringes of our society. But with a couple of things I would say, right? With the advent of the internet and social media elevating a lot of these notions, along with having people elected to office that also profess these notions, it really has become much more mainstream than it previously has. And I should note that I think that the underlying thing of all these things, when you were talking about Christian nationalism, militias, the denial of other democratic principles, it really is, I think the underlying current is because of demographic change in this country, right? The United States is projected to become a majority minority country in the next 25, 30 years. And so this all, I think, is part of a reaction to changing demographics, a loss of those that have held power for 250 years, which are generally white male Christians. And so that, I think, undergirds all of this that we're seeing, including the rise of Christian nationalism.
You say that most of those people who surveyed, and they say that it need to become a Christian nation, also think that it is unconstitutional. So how do they reconcile that this is something wrong?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, we didn't have a follow-up of how exactly, we didn't ask how will you make this happen, because obviously we didn't see that connection until we did analysis on the survey question. So it would be a really good question to ask moving forward. I think some of them, this is just my conjecture, but I think some of them believe that given who founded this country, that it should just be automatically a thing that we do, right? And perhaps aren't giving a whole lot of thought to the fact that, the Constitution says it cannot be allowed, that if enough people want it to happen, that it could happen, given what they believe are the people that founded the country, the principles that were founded in terms of most of the founding fathers being Christian, that it's sort of automatically understood that we should be a Christian nation. And so that's how some people probably think. Others probably realize that they want it to be a Christian nation, but that the Constitution prevents it. And perhaps you have to actually use provisions to change the Constitution in order for that to happen. That again doesn't make them not want it to be the case. But obviously, perhaps a segment of the population sees that that's not going to happen anytime soon, given the difficulty in changing the Constitution. So there's probably a mix of people in terms of, wanting it to happen despite the fact that the Constitution doesn't allow it, and how that comes about.
Well, Professor Rouse, thank you so much for your research, and Paul, and I hope people use the constitutional means instead of violent means.
I totally agree. I hope that's the case as well. Thank you so much. It was a very enriching conversation. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's all from our Chicago studios tonight. Thank you for tuning in. You can find previous episodes and more on our YouTube or Facebook. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV or visit muslimnetwork.tv. Salam and good night.